My name is Teresa Crook. I am the MSU Extension Field Crops Agronomist Educator located here at the Saginaw Valley Research and Education Center. My 50% of my position is actually funded by the Michigan Soybean Committee, and I help with their on-farm research. We are going to go forward with Dennis Pennington and Marty Travers, and they're going to, I believe, talk first about a ag biosecurity or bioterrorism topic before Dennis goes into his wheat fungicide presentation. So I don't know if Dennis or Marty's going to go first, but feel free to help us out this morning. Looking forward to your information.
Okay, so what we wanted to do is give an update. On the screen here is information that has been in a number of press releases in radio and TV broadcasts and whatnot about a potential bioterrorism arrest that was made, and it was kind of in our backyard, the Detroit Metro Airport. So what we thought we would do is kind of review what the case is about and provide some kind of background information regarding, you know, is there a threat, is there a concern, and so on. So I'll just quickly summarize. There were two Chinese nationals, grad students that were arrested. They were doing research on Fusarium graminearum, and they were trying to bring samples of Fusarium from their homeland into the U.S. without getting the proper approvals to import items like that. And they were caught at the airport, and they were immediately sent back home. And then later, there's arrest for them. There are biosafety protocols that they should have followed. You can get permits, and it is valuable to bring in, disease material and things like that from other states and from other countries, perhaps, but there's proper ways to do that, and they didn't follow those proper ways. So maybe what I'd like to do is, ask between Marty and Eric, let's just have a conversation about, what is the disease? What are the implications? Is there really an agroterrorism threat here? And then talk a little bit on the end about why research is so important and that we need funding for research. So maybe I'll throw out a question for Marty. What is FHB? What crops does it infect?
Yeah, so the pathogen or the fungal species that was brought in and is being discussed is Fusarium graminearum. So that's a pathogen of wheat, corn, and other small grains. We also find it on soybean roots, dry bean roots. So it's a really widely distributed disease or pathogen. And it's thought actually that this particular species originated perhaps in North America. So it's native to this area.
Okay. So one of the questions, I guess, is, what are the concerns for widespread, like epidemic level infection from the pathogen? Do we have any concerns regarding that?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we do from the standpoint of this is, I think the really important thing to understand here that this Fusarium species we're talking about is widely distributed. It causes annual losses in the US and globally. And we do research on it. Eric does research on it to help better manage it and reduce those losses, be it through head scab in wheat or gibberella ear mold in corn. I think one of the reasons why it sort of caught the headlines a little bit is that it can also produce a toxin, sometimes called vomitoxin or deoxynivalenol, and a few others, but I think the main point here is that because it can produce that toxin, that's sort of really gotten everyone's attention and especially played into this agro bioterrorism, headline, I guess. But it's something, that is tested for, that toxin is tested for regularly during the food chain at sale point. our farmers are often docked or can be docked if there is levels of this toxin in grain samples. So it's a naturally occurring thing, and we do a lot of work to try and minimize its impact. And from disease modeling efforts, trying to figure out what conditions are favorable for disease. So I posted some tweets this week actually about some increased risk due to temperature and moisture up on the east side of the thumb. Just the way the weather conditions are, great conditions for that disease to take hold. And so just trying to alert our farmers so that they can take measures, just being aware of where it could be a problem, and then perhaps making a fungicide application to help with suppression.
Yeah, Eric, could you share some insights as far as national security and agro-terrorism? What are issues or concerns, or what are things that you think about when you see this story?
Okay, so Fusarium, as Marty was saying, it's a huge risk every year, and this is it all it takes is the appropriate weather events because the potential is always there. Now, in terms of being an agro-terrorism threat, now I think that maybe a lot of folks will remember, folks on this call remember 1996. If you look at the yield charts across the northern plains, every wheat growing region in the country in Ontario was affected by Fusarium that year. And so we've been working on on this problem for a long time, almost 30 years now. So, and we've built up a suite of tools to manage the disease, and the timing is perfect because Dennis is going to talk about fungicides here, mechanisms of control. I also want to address there's genetic resistance out there, and this is something that we do every single year. We screen all of the commercial wheat varieties that are available to growers in Michigan and large parts of the eastern U.S. here. The best control, we have pretty good control for this disease. I'll come right up front and say that. It's not, I don't, now to the threats that we currently have, the native populations of Graminearum and so forth, we have good controls for those. We are ready for epidemics of this pathogen, and we've been preparing for them for a very long time. And that includes building up the genetic resistance, screening new varieties every year, so you know what you're working with. Which in our breeding program, I didn't really introduce myself well enough. I'm a plant breeder and geneticist working on wheat improvement at Michigan State. So we have a wheat variety development program, and we don't let susceptible material into the marketplace. And we screen material to let our colleagues know what the level of resistance is in their material. But the point is we have genetic resistance to this pathogen. That's a good control mechanism. You couple that with a fungicide and applied at the appropriate timing, and we're in pretty good shape. We have good controls for this pathogen is the take home message.
So that brings up a good point, Eric, and maybe I'll throw it back to Marty a little bit. The variety resistance that we currently have in varieties that are being planted, as well as the use of the fungicides, those two things that we use working together to manage the vomitoxin level to make sure that we're producing a safe quality product for our millers that then mill it into flour and then gets made into food products. But could there be other like ecotypes or strains of Fusarium coming from some other part of the world that maybe our variety resistance or what fungicides couldn't protect against?
Yeah, Dennis, it's possible. I mean, reading between the lines, I don't think that's what's going on here.
Yeah.
But that's why we have regulations and protocols in place. So we work with the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, otherwise known as APHIS. And so we work with them to secure protocols to bring in isolates and then demonstrate that we can contain the isolates appropriately and then destroy them once we're finished with them. And that's a way of minimizing any threat. And then only permits would only be given if it's just if it's seen that there's value to bringing those isolates in and not a greater threat. So I think what really happened here is that that process was worked around, and that's why we have this trouble that's going on now. There was a couple of questions by Julius. So is the Graminearum strain different from the US? Potentially. I should also say too, with our global trade that we have, we're moving these things around all of the time through, feed, food things. So, yeah, this is in some ways it's certainly again caught the headlines, but I think it's good to sort of put it back into perspective.
Yeah.
Clay was also asking if it's widely spread in North America. Why did they have to bring it in? I don't know, Clay.
That
There
was
are,
my comment too.
yeah, there are, right. So there are strains here, obviously here in Michigan as well, that can be collected and isolated. So maybe they had a particular strain that behaves well in the lab, and so they chose to use that. Frances Trail just retired from our department, and she spent her whole career working on Fusarium graminearum, and she pretty much worked on one strain because it was a well-performing strain in the lab, if you will. It was very usable, and we have a genome sequence for that particular strain. Yeah.
All right. So there was a comment about the motive was intentional and hence considered agritourism weapon. I can't really speak to that, but isn't there some list that potential of like pathogens that are on this like agritourism or agriterrorism
Yeah,
list?
there's a list of agents. I believe the language is select agents, and so there's some things that we're not allowed to import. There's different containment levels too. So that containment level for things that perhaps we don't have here in the US and are considered a considerable threat to food security.
Mhm.
There are facilities, but there's only a few facilities in the US where those can be used. But again, the strain we're talking about, the pathogen or the plant pathogen we're talking about here, is widely distributed globally and is probably native to North America.
Yep. Yep. So I want to wrap up this discussion and move on to the next part of it here. But before we do that, this is kind of an opportunity for us to highlight the importance of doing this research. Eric, you said it. We've got like 30 years of research on this particular pest. So it's important that we have that funding and so that we're able to continue to do that.
I want to highlight that a lot of that funding, the bulk of the funding is coming through Congress through the U.S. Wheat and Barley Scab Initiative. It's a $15 million program that supports variety development. It supports extension activities, outreach activities, testing of new fungicides. That's how we're able to test all the new Miravis products that are in the marketplace. It looks at pathogen biology so that has been a great support for us. And we also have support within Michigan from the Michigan Wheat Program. We work a lot of fusarium work is supported in the public space by our wheat growers and through Congress. And so that funding is pretty important to us and to everyone in this room.
Yeah, and Jody, I think is on. Jody Pollock Newsom is the executive director of the Michigan Wheat Program. Jody, did you want to have any comments about local funding within the state of Michigan?
Yeah, Dennis, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity. This is certainly something we've been watching and working with our experts at MSU. The Michigan Wheat Program was started by growers in 2011. And pretty much since 2012, we've been funding this kind of research on what can we do for growers, what can we do to look at quality, what can we do to look at yield, and certainly have been large funders of Eric and his position, the work that Marty Chilvers does in his lab, and also we are a partial funder with MSU of Dennis's position. So our goal is to make sure that we have the information, it's out there, we can get it to growers, and we're looking at that multiple solutions. What do we have as far as treatment, and what do we have as far as genetics? So if there are growers that want to know more than just even now, but in the future, we have an annual meeting every year. June 25th, we will be having our field day. We will be at the pathology farm. We will walk through. Eric has a stop, Marty has a stop, Dennis has a stop, and we will be taking a look at what they've done, and you'll have chances to ask questions. And you can always go on our website at miwheat.org, and there is previous events that you can look at. under the education tab. And also we have a research results tab. You can go there and see the reports when we get them from researchers like Dennis, Eric, and Marty. We put them up on the website. So lots of ways to get information, and just glad that we can be here and make sure we're ready when things like this happen.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Jody. Appreciate those comments. And Marty, you mentioned select agents. I see somebody posted in the comment a link to that. So if in case somebody wants to go see it, see
Yep.
what's on the list. Are there any final comments that Eric or Marty or Jody that you have on this topic before we move on? No?
No,
Okay.
I think it's just a good opportunity to, yeah, like Eric said as well, just to remind people of all the work that goes on at university levels, government agencies, and private industry to help protect food and feed.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks both of you for chiming in on that. And Marty, you might have some comments on the rest of what's coming yet or coming next. So
Sure.
thanks for being on.
All righty.
Okay, so the original topic was going to be talking more about fungicide application equipment for that T3 timing, it targeting specifically Fusarium head blight or Fusarium graminearum, the pathogen that was the root of this whole story. Marty did a virtual breakfast back on May 8th. There's a link here, and I think maybe Teresa can put that in the chat. Marty covered the basics of, when to spray. He mentioned the wheat scab model that I got the URL to here, and kind of went over the biology of the pathogen and how to manage it. So I don't want to rehash what Marty did there. One thing I did want to go further into is a little bit on product placement. I have gotten a lot of questions about products. This is the wheat scab model. And Marty, you mentioned you've been tweeting about in the thumb area here a little bit of elevated risk. This is what it was. I guess this is yesterday or day before.
Yeah, it sort of popped up a little bit. I'm kind of curious to run it again right now, but I mean, I think the point is just to realize that we have this tool out there. It does a pretty good job at predicting risk. It's based on humidity and moisture, and so just good to be aware of. Yeah, that risk is still there today, but it's declining, which is good.
Yep. And so onset of flowering is when you see these yellow anthers beginning to show up on the heads. So when half of the heads in a field are showing this, you are at the beginning of flowering at Feeks 10.5.1. And I've gotten a number of questions this year from growers wanting to know what fungicides are available. So I wanted to put a plug in for this. The Crop Protection Network is a group of Marty and fellow plant pathologists that they put together these joint fact sheets. And there's a fact sheet here on fungicide efficacy for control of wheat diseases. And it's got a list. I know you can't see this, and that was not my intention, but it's got a list of the active ingredients, of the product names. And then there's an area here where it lists about 6 or 8 diseases, and it gives ratings for each of them for all of these diseases. So this is a great resource if you're wanting to target something specific. And there's a column for Fusarium head blight on there. So maybe Teresa, if you can plug that in the chat box too, that'd be great. So application, higher volumes of water is better. In fact, some recommend as high as 17 to even 20 gallons of water per acre. The goal is to cover that head completely. Sometimes people mix things before they're really ready to go to the field. With fungicide, you don't want to mix too early. In fact, don't add your fungicide to your tank until you know you're headed to the field, because you don't want to let that set for a couple of hours and then get a rainstorm, and then now it sets for a day or two in the tank. You want to get it sprayed just as soon as you get it mixed up. Your target should be coarse to very coarse droplets. I've had people say, well, if I create a finer mist, I could probably do a better job of covering the head. Well, when you create a finer mist, those droplets become airborne more quickly. Larger size droplets will travel farther. Smaller droplets will get caught in the wind currents and then maybe not even reach your target at all. So you want to choose a droplet size in this coarse to very coarse range here. You don't want to get down to this medium or fine. Timing is essential. You want to target that, that 10.51 to maybe a couple of days afterwards, but you certainly don't want to go beyond, that 4 or 5 day range, because once you get to day 6 or 7, your efficacy drops right off very quickly. So your target should be start spraying when you're at 10.51, when 50% of those heads are flowering. And then the best efficacy for control of the vomitoxin is in that maybe 3 or 4 days after that 10.51. You want your boom height to be about 12 inches above the canopy. And for every time you double that height, you get half of the coverage. So keeping that boom height pretty steady there at 12 inches above the canopy is important. If you got rolling fields or rough fields where it's hard, you got this sprayer, rolling over the field and whatnot, you might have to slow your ground speed down. Because if you just raise your booms up higher so that you can go faster, you're going to reduce your coverage on the heads. And if you have awns, you might want to use the coarser droplet, like this very coarse droplet here. This is from Sprayers 101. This is showing like the potential coverage with some different patterns of sprayer tips. A conventional flat fan, if the sprayer is traveling in this direction, with a conventional flat fan, you'll get really good coverage on the left side of that head, but you'll get none or very low coverage on this, I guess, on the leading edge or the front edge of the head. And you need to get coverage on both sides. So they do make twin patterns, and there's a number of different ways you can get twin patterns. You can get dual nozzles, you can get tips that spray both directions. But when you do this shallow, and you're traveling this direction, you'll get good coverage on the back side of the head, and you'll get low coverage on the front. Where you get the best coverage, where you get medium all the way around the head, is when you do this aggressive rearward facing angle, with the more of the straighter down, just slightly angled to the front patterns. So the way that works is that you're traveling in this direction. The orientation of these tips is important. This is that aggressive back angle here, so that when you're spraying, you're getting better coverage. This is where you're getting the coverage on the head. You don't need this one to go straight down into the canopy. You need this one to cover the front side of the head to get good coverage. And when you use this type of a pattern, you can generally increase your travel speed when you're making applications. So I've also had, and actually not in Michigan this year, but just south of us in Ohio, they got frequent rainfall right at flowering, and they were not able to get ground sprayers into the field, so they had to resort to aerial application. And there's been increasing interest in drone applications. So I did find a study, Jason DeVoe with Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Food did a study comparing these. So I just wanted to give you just a little bit of information. There's not a lot of data out there on drones, but just some things for you to think about. One thing that's important, see this drone hovering right here. Notice what's going on in the wheat below it. You get this downwash pattern. This is a helicopter spraying in the background. And notice what's going on here. That helicopter is high enough off the canopy that the spray is falling to the ground. You don't get this downwash with a helicopter like you do with a drone. So the way they set up their study is they set up the helicopter and the drone both to put 5 gallons per acre on. The helicopter had a 20-foot boom, had these CP0305 nozzles on 12-inch spacing. The helicopter traveled at 60 miles per hour, and he traveled 5 to 10 foot above the crop canopy. With a drone, it was a DJI Grass T30 with these T-Jet 110015 nozzles, 5 gallons per acre, same rate. This time they was traveling at 11 miles per hour and 10 feet above the crop canopy. So they put this water sensitive paper 5 3/4 foot apart from each other. And you can see how they just kind of wrapped the head with this and then clipped it with a paper clip or a binder clip. And so they made their applications over it. And then when you unroll the water sensitive paper, this is what you see. So this is the area where the head was exposed. This was the area that was like rolled underneath when you wrap it around the head. So this is what it looks like. So there's a couple ways to measure this. So this is the coverage with a helicopter. This is the coverage with a drone. So there's two things. There's the area. So if you was able to add up the area of all of these locations where the spray hit the water sensitive paper. The other way is to count how many spots are there. So both of them give you a little bit of an indication of the type of coverage you'll get. And so this is the results. So this has got the drone on the left, the helicopter on the right, and this is looking at the coverage percentage. So this is the amount of area. And the drone was able to cover 3.6% of the area. The helicopter was able to cover only 3%. So the drone actually got, in terms of area covered, a little bit more. So now if we look at the density, this is where they're counting the actual number of dots on that. The drone clearly got quite a bit more spots on there than what the helicopter did. So a little bit difference in the way that it covers. So with that in mind, I just wanted to throw this up here and compare. This is what the average field sprayer gets for coverage, 13.6%. And this is the area compared to the 3.6 or 3. So I guess the bottom line was, for those that are wanting to use drones, they would be, comparable to a helicopter or maybe a little bit better than a helicopter, but you still don't get the kind of coverage that you can get with a ground rig. So, only go to an aerial application if you just absolutely cannot get into the field. So until they're able to figure out ways to get better coverage, and the other thing that's important is follow the protocol with the drone, because they did a couple of studies also. Well, suppose the drone operator wants to go faster. We'll fly faster and see what happens, because I can cover more area or more quickly if I'm flying faster. Well, you can see when you jump to 16 mile an hour, your coverage drops slightly. And then, so if you compare 1.9, and this was at 3 gallons per acre, to the 3.6% coverage, and they're putting on 5 gallons per acre at 10 mile an hour. So 3.6 compared to 1.9, that's 1.5 times more coverage. So, and then this one, this was just the dots, the number of spots that made it on there. You can see that as you go faster with a drone, you get less spots. So with that, I think I'll wrap it up and take any questions there. Ground sprayer is always the best. Use the aggressive angled twin pattern nozzles. Make sure you're applying them in the correct orientation, forward and backward. Use coarse to very coarse droplets. Don't mix until you're ready to spray. Keep your boom height 12 inches above the canopy. And only if rain is preventing ground spray, drones could be an option. And I've gotten a few questions recently about, well, how much time do our common fungicides we use at T3? This is the rain fast period for Pro-Align, Miravis Ace, Prosaro Pro, and Spherex. So I have had that question a number of times here lately. So with that, I think I'll wrap up there. And unless, Marty, you have any more comments you want to make, or?
Dennis,
No.
I'm going to make a comment quick before Marty jumps in there. Talk about those rain fast times, because some are listening on phones and can't see the slide, Dennis.
Oh, I'm sorry. So rain fast times is the amount of time that it takes for the fungicide to be like adhered to the head to where rain isn't going to wash it off and reduce effectiveness. So Pro-Line is 3 to 6 hours. Miravis Ace is 2 hours. Prosaro Pro is 1 hour. And Spherex is 15 minutes. So there are differences between them in terms of, if you got a rain in the forecast coming, you're trying to get your fungicide on, you know, this is what you should expect. So sorry, Marty, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine, Dennis. Absolutely. And sometimes the label will be sort of like a guideline as well. So obviously the longer the better. If you call me and it's raining and you just finish spraying, yeah, that lasts, while it's raining, we're pretty much done. But yeah, there may be some differences between those products. Yeah.
All right. So I haven't been watching the chat box.
So there was one question in here for Dennis, and then there's a couple that are scattered through for different things. But what is the back angle of the aggressive spray nozzle, Dennis? Do you know?
I got to look that up. I want to say it's 110 degrees, but I don't know if that's correct or not. Let me look that up and I'll try to, if I can find it while we're still on, I'll put it in the chat.
I think
Okay.
I think
Thank
that
you.
sounds right.
Okay.
Alrighty, there's some other questions, and I'm going to start from the top. I'm going to have there was a comment about the smoke. I think that Christine put it in there, and then Jeff, if you want to go ahead and talk about the smoke a little bit, you had put
Right.
something in the chat, but if you want to kind of expand on that.
Yeah, and I actually had some material on that. We have been similar to last year, but important distinction. Most of the smoke that we've had in the Upper Midwest, which is from wildfires in Saskatchewan and Manitoba in Canada. The fire season there typically in Canada is June through the end of the summer into early September. It's been relatively dry, and unfortunately, they do have problems with fires, but it's not as severe and not as quite as bad as it was last year. And we just the timing of it with the weather system that went through a week ago. That's what brought the smoke down south of the border. It's looking right now that most of that, at least for the near future, will remain north of the border. But I guess the point is that we could be likely see another episode or two here during the upcoming several weeks. But it's something linked with unusually dry weather over Canada. Really, and it goes back months into last year, but so far it hasn't been quite as serious or severe as it was last year. That was extraordinary what we saw last year. So hopefully it won't. It's the same thing, just another version of it, but not quite as bad as it was before.
I think there was a tongue-in-cheek kind of question or comment. That's the Canada tariff apply to smoke. I'll let you address that.
It's going to be interesting to see how that one is handled and how they've economists put value on anything. Maybe they can figure out something for the
Great way
for
to
the
pass the
smoke.
buck.
Yeah, no, that's a great comment.
Okay, back to maybe a little bit more serious. With the cool weather we have been getting here, will there be a longer window to spray the wheat?
With the cool weather, yeah, that might slow the development of the crop down just a little bit. So that could increase the window, I guess, but I don't know, Marty, what do you think?
Yeah, the primary window here is like 7 days from the beginning of flowering. So once we're at 50% of the heads in the field with anthers, and once we hit that 10-5-1, that beginning flowering stage, we have 7 days to get that fungicide on. When we go outside of that window, either earlier or later, yeah, there might be a little bit, but nowhere near as great as that primary window. So you've really got to hit it within that week period.
Okay, and then there's another question, kind of a follow-up, the opposite. Do temperature levels over 80 degrees cause a problem? I'm assuming for efficacy.
I don't think so. I don't think there should be any effect there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
the only thing that when you get temperatures like in the 90s, that can impact pollen tube formation and some things like that within the head, but that's physiological within the plant. That's not an efficacy thing with the fungicide.
Okay, and then there was one question that kind of goes back to your other original comments about the agroterrorism, and this fungus incident happened about a year ago. What has happened to the fungus samples in the meantime? Do customs or border control have them, or how do they handle them? Does anybody know?
I don't. I mean,
don't.
they may have been autoclaved. I don't know.
Okay. And I think that was it. If there's any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Oh, there is one more. Any experience using dual PWM with straight down or back jet configuration versus a twin jet?
The PWM is the pulsating tip, correct? Is that how I'm understanding that?
Mhm.
The straight down, so I found the at least the T-jet angle tip. It's a 30-70. So the front angle is 30 degrees forward. The back angle is 70 degrees backward. I was looking at it from the other direction because 180 minus 70 is the 110.
Yep.
So having that 70-degree angle on the back is what's important, as well as that leading 30-degree forward angle to get good coverage of the head. As far as this dual PWM, as long as you can get those tips at those angles, I think you'd be okay. But I would try to come close to those angles if you can. I don't know what adjustments there are on those type of nozzle bodies.
Okay. Oh, there's another question too. I'll go back for the RUPs in a second. At this time, if there's no other questions for Dennis and Marty, if there's any other specialists that want to have any comments at this point in time, feel free to jump in. So if there's no more questions, keep in mind that you can review or see all these recordings for all the virtual breakfasts, not only for this year, but past years. And you can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Facebook.
So there's
One
a
more question.
couple more questions.
Yep,
So,
I just saw them pop in. Go ahead.
So Julius, your question about is there a state or national surveillance monitoring for fungicide resistance, because that's one of our tools for managing. Yeah, there is. My lab's actually doing that at the moment. We did a look at what's happening in Michigan a couple of years ago with a PhD student. And we have another project now to look more nationally at any fungicide resistance that might be occurring. So far, we haven't seen any major concern, but that's definitely something we want to keep an eye on. And Clay had a question there about to allow defensive an opportunity to test the material for trial. How does the government hold them? I think you mean the material.
Right.
I mean, in a Ziploc bag, they're going to be safe. It's no different to having like infested grain or something like that, right? Like if it's kept contained, it's safe. And they're looking for the date of the Michigan Wheat Day. Sorry, Trey.
Yep, I know. I was going to say, isn't the 25th, I believe? I believe it's the 25th at the pathology farm. Yes.
Yes, it is. The afternoon.
Yes.
Yep.
Right. It's a combination.
It's June 25th.
Yep. And for people that weren't aware, it's a kind of combination day. The weed kind of thing is in the morning and the wheat day is in the afternoon. So thank you, everyone. If there's no other questions, I wish everyone to have a safe and timely season. And thank you all for attending today. Think safety first. Talio.